So I actually want to start with some user research. Who here got dressed this morning? Excellent, well done. Have you ever thought about how a blind person picks out an outfit in the morning? So, yeah, that's the first question. Who here had a cup of tea this morning? Who likes it milky? And who likes a proper builder's tea? So again, how do you think a blind person would know exactly how much milk is the right amount of milk for them? And again, how would a blind person know when the date on their food has passed? So I started thinking about all of these questions when I was working on a user research project for Guide Dogs of the Blind Association. It was a 6-month project on the issues that blind people have with public transport. So we're working with 50 participants. I was basically speaking to blind people most days on this project, and after a while you get bored of talking about trains, so you start by figuring out what else how on earth they lead their lives and other aspects of their life. So for their clothes, they have this like little gadget, and it's mostly for color matching. You hold it up and it says red. Well, that's terrible, but yeah, red, or you know, blue with white stripes, and that's how they end up not looking ridiculous. And for the milk, they have a little hook-on gadget to their mug, which has one pitch of buzz for the water, and another pitch of buzz for the milk, so they know exactly how much they like. And it's a slidey device that's really cool. So then when I asked them, so how do you know when your food goes off? I couldn't wait to hear the answer. I was like, I bet there's a really cool gadget for this. And sadly, I found out that there actually isn't any way for them to know when their food goes off. So they know when their milk, they know exactly how much milk to put in their tea, but they don't know whether that milk is actually off. So yeah, ridiculous. So I decided to start thinking about this, and there were two kind of sensors that I could use apart from visual, which obviously they couldn't use. So that was either audio or touch. So I started experimenting with audio. Yeah. So I was using RFID tags, which could basically pick up any temperature abuse changes and then kind of predict the expiry date. And because I was using Android, you just had to hold up your phone, no app required, to the tag, and it would link to a clip that told you when the expiry date would be based on this temperature information it was getting. So I got it to work, and that was all cool. And I realized that actually this isn't the way I want it to go. Expiry information should be so simple. Why should I get my phone involved? And it's also kind of expensive to put on packaging, because with packaging it's kind of such a small part of the food cost. So putting this kind of electronic label on it would be kind of silly. And also, not everyone has a smartphone, especially when I was looking at visual impairment. A lot of visually impaired people are older and they wouldn't necessarily have a smartphone. So one day, I was looking at a banana, and then everything changed. It looked like this. I'm kind of forgotten about it, and it was starting to turn a bit black. But it made me think about how it's obvious what this packaging is telling me. It's telling me to eat it soon, it's going to go bad soon. Why doesn't our plastic packaging do this? So I kind of became obsessed with this kind of idea of this packaging that kind of turns kind of really gross and bumpy over time, and then obviously lets you know that it's no longer safe to eat. So I started experimenting with various materials that could help me achieve this. So a big key part of this when I was thinking about materials is the kind of perception that the user would feel when they're feeling it. It had to be a really kind of clear-cut, perceptible change between the smooth to bumpy experience. So I had loads of different options, and I found that in the end, using a natural gel to mimic the actual expiry date, the expiry experience of the food was the best option. So I'll show you what I came up with now. So I ended up designing the bookmark expiry label for food. It's a bioreactive food expiry label, which basically means the label knows exactly when your food goes off. So the reason for that is, as I said, I ended up using a gel in the label that when I was looking at meat, it's a high protein gel that actually experiences decay in the exact same way that the meat is experiencing decay. And it's a four-layer structure. So the high protein gel ended up being gelatine, one that we're very familiar with. So jelly set solid, and you set it over this plastic sheet. And then at the start, you can't feel the bumps because your finger, the gel is creating a barrier between your finger and those bumps. And when it completely expires, the gel turns back into a liquid and basically breaks the barrier, and then your finger can feel the bumps. So that's the way it works. I'm sure you were asking. So the challenges when you're designing something like this, and it is really innovative and it is really potentially cool for the food industry, not just for visually impaired people, might I add. It's actual accurate information about when our food expires is information that not even sighted people have. That's pretty cool. But the thing is, when you're developing this, you're basically setting the parameters for when you tell that gel to kind of show its expiry, because of course it expires at the same time as the food, but there's still you can still manipulate deciding when the food is actually totally expired or when it would be acceptably expired, because at the moment the way expiry dates are calculated is more to do with, does it look a bit funny? It probably isn't unsafe to eat, and that's what the retailers go off. So I need to decide whether I go towards the current standards of this kind of aesthetic going off, or whether I go to the actual safety standards. So what I'm trying to say is that you have such a huge amount of control over the behavior that your users are going to exhibit, because you could potentially reduce a lot of food waste by showing them the true expiry of stuff, or you could make it super safe and so basically, yeah, you can make it really safe, and then but maybe potentially create more waste. So you have all of these pros and cons to consider. It's not just setting a parameter, and so you have a huge amount of control over the user. Another challenge is that this is such a new space in the food industry. It's called active and intelligent packaging. It's finally got a name. I'm part of that, and yeah, it's so new that under the regulations set for this active and intelligent packaging, I was reading the ones that would be relevant to my label. Let's remember this label has a huge amount of power over when people could potentially eat their food. If we were to do it wrong, this could potentially kill people. But despite this, the only regulation that exists that could mildly be relevant to what I'm doing is that it must state "do not eat" somewhere on the label. So I think it's just a good description of where we're at with this kind of technology. However, I think that using actual data, I guess if you can call it data, information from our food is such a powerful tool, and I think absolutely it could make the food industry a far less wasteful and a much safer place, because we're getting much better information about when things do go wrong in the supply chain. They should not be going on the shelves, because food poisoning is on the rise. So it's the supply chains really that have to blame, and they shouldn't be putting on food on the shelves that shouldn't really be there. So I think that being able to access this information is going to make for a much more positive food industry in the future, and yeah, generally a more awesome future for everyone. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'd love to answer any questions that you might have.
So your gel, you set your gel, it's kind of like a fuse, I suppose, to go off to match the same speed as the meat goes off.
So it's not date dependent. It's not like you set this concentration. So the way you manipulate it is concentration. So a weaker gel is just going to have fewer bonds in the structure, and it's just going to break a lot quicker. whereas a much stronger gel with a higher concentration is just going to be a lot more hardier. So that's the way it works. So it's not kind of time dependent. It's not like, you know, a 5% concentration gel is going to last 5 days. It's very much dependent on the temperature conditions. So so that's the way you manipulate it.
So if you keep your meat out of the fridge,
it's going to exponentially degrade faster, the exact same way as the food is. So it's kind of like mini food on the corner of your package. So it's the best thing. It's the best.
Simulating it sort of simulates something.
Exactly. We're mimicking the decay process by having mini food in the corner of your package that goes all the way through the supply chain, and it's something you can actually get information from. Yeah. Yep.
In terms of this, have you kind of approached many supermarkets?
Oh yeah, I should probably say that. We're launching our first retail trial with a UK retailer early next year. We're going to be making 10,000 units across one product line to test how consumers like it or hate it. We'll find out.
With regards to testing the actual product, how did you find testing it on different materials? Because it works on plastic, obviously, as you mentioned, but where you showed like the glass, I think it was gherkins, or sorry.
I mean, we've only been working on a meat solution so far, because I chose meat because when you waste meat, it's like you're wasting the most amount of resources that have been put into making that meat, and therefore it's the hugest impact. So meat packaging is kind of standard, and that's why we've got this kind of, but absolutely for other food groups, we're going to have to redesign the label.
Yeah. I'm interested to know if you use this yourself to work out whether food's actually expired or not.
Well, I think I'm a bit busy to be making these things all the time, apart from for prototypes for testing, but I generally don't use expiry dates at all. So I tend to only use cues from my food, such as smell and look and that kind of thing. So I probably would use this as a second opinion, but I think this is good for people who are kind of paranoid about dates. And to be honest, dates are absolutely ridiculous way of telling when your food goes off, because if you've got a pack of meat and you're going to keep it in 7-degree temperature, it's only going to last 2 days. If you keep it in 4-degree temperature like you should, it should last 4 days. If you keep it in 1-degree temperature, it'll last 4.5 days. So it's completely, the date is irrelevant, so they shouldn't be there in the first place, because it is creating a huge amount of waste. We waste a third of the food that the world produces, so I think that a more accurate way is absolutely the way to go.
So to follow up on that though, are you allowed to, with a big retailer, are you allowed to say when the food is actually expired, or do you have to kind of dovetail with the expiry date on the actual packet?
I don't know if people know this, but there's no legal requirement to have an expiry date, only on baby formula. Everything else is kind of an industry standard, so it's very easy to manipulate, and absolutely I think it will have to kind of mesh in with the current date code system, because people are just so used to it, but the wording around the date code system would have to change, and that's something we're exploring at the moment. So it could say something like used by this date, or until the expiry bump label turns bumpy. So it's just a way of how, yeah, you can tell it's a work in progress. So it's all about communicating that and making it easier for the consumer to make that transition, because you can't just go bam, bump mark, that's it, good luck. So that is another challenge. It's the communication, and that's why I asked you a question of how do you introduce your product to the visitors that you have, because that's something that we're thinking about as well. How do you best introduce this idea? Because our research has found that after a short explanation, people get it and they love it, but it's how do you send a little person in to every single person to explain this idea, and that's the question. Yeah.
Yeah, just in terms of the gel that's used, have you experimented with anything other than gelatin? My reason for asking is because at the moment you said you're trying it on meats. if you were to use it on vegetables, then that would then make it...
Well, it wouldn't be accurate.
But it wouldn't mean on other types of products, even if it was jarred food in some sorts, it wouldn't then make it vegan or for strict vegetarians because of the actual material itself.
Well, you wouldn't use gelatin anyway because it is a high protein gel and there's very little protein in gherkins. So you'd have to use more plant-based gel. For example, if you were looking at potatoes, which are high in starch, you'd use a starch gel. That's just, I'm not trying to put meat labels on everyone's vegetables because that would it wouldn't even work. That's the whole point of why this label is so accurate, because you're taking the main element of whatever food you're interested in labeling and kind of modelling that decay process. Like meat can never decay at the same rate as salad.
So,
yeah, so this would be quite specific to meats.
exactly.
Yeah.
One more, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
What happens if you freeze this? Does it still work?
No. However, our research again has found that when people freeze things, they tend to portion it up anyway, so the expiry date already becomes irrelevant when you freeze something. So this is kind of for fresh products only. So yeah, I mean technically gelatin when you freeze it and it comes back. I don't know if anyone's tried to freeze jelly before. Go home and do it. It's like really weird what happens after you thaw it. It's like lumpy and no.